Welcome to another exciting episode of the Scouting for Growth podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to a true trailblazer in the worlds of financial services and insurance. OBE Louise Smith, or Luce Smith, for those of you who may know her very well. With a career spanning leadership roles across digital transformation, data, product innovation, and operations, Lou has been at the forefront of driving change in some of the most iconic organizations in the industry. Think about that. From delivering the UK's first steps into digital distribution at Barclays to leading the digital transformation of the Royal Bank of Scotland during its turnaround to profitability, Lou has consistently pushed the boundaries of what is possible. She also made history as the first ever Chief Digital Officer at Lloyd's of London, where she shaped the strategy to create the world's most advanced digital insurance marketplace. Now, as the driving force behind Neuron, a cutting-edge platform by WTW, Lou is on a mission to redefine the insurance landscape. Passionate about innovation, collaboration, and making financial services more accessible and inclusive, she is also a mentor to the next generation of entrepreneurs and a champion for closing the skills gap in the technology sector, something I'm passionate about too. So in today's episode, we will dive into Lou's incredible journey, explore the vision behind Neuron, and discuss the key takeaways that insurance providers need to consider in our current AI-driven world. Whether you are a corporation, an insurer, a broker, an entrepreneur, or an investor, this conversation is packed with insights you won't want to miss. So without further ado, let's welcome Luce Smith to the Scouting for Growth podcast. Hi, Lou.
Hi, Sabine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so thrilled that you're joining me on Scouting for Growth today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. You know I'm a massive fan of yours. I'm actually an avid listener to your podcast anyway, so I'm so excited to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm thrilled. And so, as you know, the magic start of the podcast is really about knowing you.
Sure.
So who is Luce Smith?
Sure.
Where do you come from? I know you've been in banking and you are now working with us in insurance. So what got you to move from one to the other?
Yeah, I'd love to say it was totally planned, Sabine, but these things never are. So I'm Lou Smith. I started my career in financial services, largely in retail banks. So I joined Barclays. Best to look at it in thirds. I joined Barclays. And did I know I wanted to do stuff in digital? No. And we probably didn't call it that then. All I know is when I started in Barclays, I had a real passion for how do we make the services that we were offering more accessible to clients and customers. And the reason why I'm so passionate about that is, and I've talked about this before, my brother, unfortunately, lost his daughter to a drunk driver. He also lost his wife to lung cancer. And they're massive life changes and events. And I started to speak to people who have massive life changes and events. And let's be honest, Sabine, that's all of us. We all have moments in life that mean the last thing we're looking at is our credit rating and our credit history. And actually, you forget about the things that you do when life feels okay. And actually, my brother, unfortunately, he didn't keep an eye on those things, as you would expect, through those periods. And those two big events actually have impacted 30 years on how we can access financial services. And I started to do a fair bit of research on this, talking to entrepreneurs, small business owners, the builders, the innovators, the disruptors, as well as individuals. And this is unfortunately common. So I've been passionate for my entire career about how do I support or change a corner of our industry so that we actually just do better for customers. And that led me to some projects, some activities in my initial career that all started to take workflow, processes, distribution, and things like that and go, how could we make this better? How could we make it faster? How could we make it more accessible? How could we make it more inclusive? Mm-hmm. And as part of that, I've been privileged to be part of many firsts. So I was part of the teams and the leadership who delivered the first online and mobile banking channels within the UK. I was very privileged to partner as part of my role in NatWest. We were the first bank to launch Apple Pay into the UK. We were the first one to be ready. There were a few who launched all around the same time, but I'm glad to say we were first. And that opened up digital payments. Yeah. And I was part of the team who actually delivered the first, end-to-end mortgage renewals so that people could do that online, start to break down investments and how do you get that to the hands of the many rather than just the hands of the few. So I've been really privileged as part of my banking career to be part of many firsts. And I think that led, Sabine, to me getting very passionate when we had the financial crisis, similar to yourself, when you started to see this incredible community emerge of, retail bank disruptors. How do you use data to drive better decisioning? You then saw the rise of the insurtechs, wealth and asset management. And I got very involved in that community. And we all know and love those retail challenge. We all probably carry their cards in our pockets. The Monzos, the Revoluts, the Starlings, all of those players that actually showed us very simply how we spend money. Yeah. In very simple narrative, this is where you spent some money. And actually, when you think about it, what they bought was this transparency and this culture of we care about the customer. We don't say it because you feel it. We actually care about making this accessible to you through the narratives we use. So I became from there one of the Treasury, the Her Majesty's Treasury ambassadors for FinTech, working with government and regulators and the industry, the existing incumbents, the new builders and disruptors, to look at how do we drive more open competition and actually how do we get investment into those groups. Mm-hmm. So you can now see a path, Sabine, where I then became chair of the board for Innovate Finance, which is the trades body, and I'm also chair of the board for Stripe. Yeah. But in my executive career, I look at what new digital distribution models can I also lead and change to make it better outcomes for clients and customers.
Yeah, and we need to disrupt the insurance distribution model, right?
Of course.
So when you look at data innovation, digital transformation, which is a word which was coined by Capgemini in 2011. Sure. So it's not a new word, right? We have been digital transforming for quite a while. What does it mean for you in insurance?
Yeah, it's really funny because I came into insurance, as you know. I, again, was privileged to be the first chief digital officer in Lloyd's of London.
Amazing.
Which was really interesting. But I think for me, everybody says insurance is behind the rest of financial services. And it's a really funny statement, actually.
I agree.
To your point, also digital transformation is not new. And would you ever say to somebody, do you want to do something with data that drives better outcomes for your clients and better outcomes for your business? Nobody's going to say no. And that's digital transformation. So I think it's a funny term. So I think this is insurance behind, yes or no. I actually think it doesn't matter. What I'm seeing in insurance when I first joined, and that was only 5 or 6 years ago, it's not long. This conversation was circling around and everybody was kind of going, what do we do? But in the last 12 to 18 months, you see this passion for how do we now actually think about how do you use digital, how do you use distribution models, How do you use data? How do you use better analytics? How do you adopt AI, which you could argue the insurance industry have been doing for years, and start to think about all of those things together? And then with the convergence of technologies, particularly speed, how do you put all of that to deliver distribution models or digital business models that actually start to move the industry forward? So my view is, if we say it's behind, and you can argue is it or isn't it, I don't think it's going to take very long for it to go ahead of lots of parts of financial services, particularly how I'm seeing conversations shift in the last 12 to 18 months, and that really makes it exciting.
Yeah. It's interesting because I worked for FICO in 2008, and I actually implemented some of the first fraud models in insurance, and that was predictive analytics or distributed analytics. It was already AI, right? So as you said, we've not been using artificial intelligence for the first time in our industry. It has been a while since we have looked at credit, fraud as a mean, using artificial intelligence to improve claims processes.
Exactly.
Or underwriting activities, right?
And automation to drive greater efficiency in operations.
Yeah.
All of this stuff has been happening in the industry for a long time.
Absolutely. So when you look at now what you are doing in insurance, right? Digitizing, I would say marketplace, which would be Lloyd's of London, the Chief Digital Officer of Lloyd's, and now WTW. What influenced your approach around that transformation?
It's really funny. When anybody asks me this, as I said, I'd love to say it was all very planned out. I would love to say, as I said, in Barclays when I first started, and people now go, oh, wow, mobile, online, because everybody does it, Apple Pay into the UK. We didn't call it anything. We didn't know what that looked like. What we did was start to bring data and technologies together to create workflow. And actually, it's now become quite cool, and we call it names and things, and particularly acronyms. But for me, the bit that influenced the most is the learning. I mean, what I love about what I do now is taking all the learning of those things, some of it where it didn't work and it didn't work very well, and actually starting to think about how can I apply that here. And let's be honest, Sabine, you said it actually already. The technologies that we have today and how you can start to bring them together, how you start to think data through that workflow, how you think about driving speed through that. We can do that. The challenge is always a leadership one and a cultural one and a change adoption one, because it's really difficult to look at what do you do today, step into an unknown and go, that's going to be better. And actually, how do we power the brilliant people we have in insurance to do what they're fundamentally brilliant at? So we have an industry that is so talented, with the brokers who are all focused on how do I actually get the best outcome for my client. We have underwriters who are using, to your point, risk analytic models. And actually, even though it's not automated, the rules-based level of thinking that underwriters do day in and day out, how they apply that to risk submissions to be part of that is incredible. Now we're seeing people come into the industry who are data specialists, but they've always been here. So we're supplementing them with those specialists we've already had, but people who think about data in maybe different ways, the convergence of cognitive type data capabilities, how we're seeing generative AI scale and grow, and bringing that together with digital specialists or technology specialists who can go, I know how to manage workflow. I know how to take those capabilities to deliver end-to-end digital placement journeys, digital submission, how we improve risk, analytics type of models, how do we think about broker workbenches, underwriting workbenches, augmented underwriting. So you can see the industry, and I think this is what's exciting about insurance, is it could be the very place where we bring all of that together and we learn in a way that we maybe not have done in other parts of FS.
Yeah. And so looking at what you are doing now. Can you tell us a little bit more as to how this aligns with Neuron?
Yeah, sure. So this is exactly what Neuron is. I mean, a lot of it's in the name as well, which is all about data connectivity. So Neuron it sits as part of our core risk and broking digital trading strategy.
Okay.
As our president Lucy Clark talked about not that long in other podcasts, where she talked about, we have invested within WTW in some core capabilities. We've got momentum in all of those capabilities. They're live trading, whether that's our broking platform, whether that's how we do risk and analytics, and whether that's how we use Neuron, which is all about connectivity. So you think about digital submission and how Neuron can then organize workflow to create digital placement. All of these capabilities sit at the heart of what we're doing in WTW. And together, what they're focused on, we want to be the easiest broker and the most predictable broker and consistent broker to work with.
That's cool. I started my career at Lloyd's of London in broking.
Did
actually.
you?
Yes. I was working at the time for T.R. Miller. And I always say, I had a great time because Lloyd's was really good at coming into schools and university to actually talk about the Lloyd's market. And like they did at the time, I assume still doing today, we're invited to Lloyd's to see the Big Bell and get to feel about what the marketplace was about. And then, graduate trainee, I went to T.R. Miller. So for me, it was fine art and,
Yep.
voices.
Yeah.
And very important footballers. It was a lot of fun when starting in that. And then I went to the building stuff. But the key thing is, I remember us as brokers, right? It was very manual. It was very paper-driven and all those things. So looking at Neuron and where WTW is going with this marketplace, how does that change the way we do business at Lloyd's of London?
It's a great question, but if you think about any marketplace, you want to power people with the data and with capabilities so that they can do what they are brilliant at, which is, as I said, is focused on the best product, the best position for their clients. Things like Neuron and others enable the brokers to do that. You also want to attract new generation into that broking sector. And actually, what you don't want is to bring those in, and what they're focused on is they're focused on doing the admin connected to those processes. You want more people having great conversations with clients. All the work that we're doing, including Neuron, enables our brokers to do that because we create automation within the workflows which enables us, as you know, we launched recently Neuron powering algorithmic follow in the market with one of our great partners. We announced this in March, Liberty, we're working with, to actually drive that algorithmic follow. We launched just 2 weeks ago how you're automating facilities. So how that's starting to really be a key part of it. Well, again, it has been for a while, but automating those facilities that also enable us to drive greater scale and work in better outcomes for our clients, but also working with the carriers. So Neuron enables you, as we've talked about previously, to create data in a way or connect data in a way that actually enables you to connect any carrier to any capability or technology or system, also recognizing people are at different stages to trade in a digital way.
So, at the beginning of our discussion, we talked about is insurance, really behind. And I'm fortunate that I do mostly 80% of my work is in insurance, that I just get the one or two companies, non-insurance companies, that come and ask for help. So I've done some work in electronics, I've seen some works in tobacco, and sometimes I have to be honest, I said, is insurance that behind? Question mark. Yeah. But that takes me to algorithmic underwriting. You just mentioned the magic word of algorithmic underwriting. Please unpack what that is, because for me,
Sure.
this is a demonstration as to how we move ahead
Sure.
with innovation
Sure.
in our market.
Well, it's also driving new business models, which comes back to the point we've said it is. This is where digital transformation for me is all about leadership. It's all about working through that change with the various parties within it. And it's hard. It's really, because we're human at the end of the day, and it's always made me laugh. I don't know whether you feel this, Sabine, but change people are also the worst to change.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, because they don't want to. So for me, they're good at driving it. But I think, algorithmic underwriting is automating rules that our underwriter probably does every day, but actually looking at things in a very consistent and predictable way. But I think what the power of creating algorithms to drive underwriting decisions is really interesting when you think about, actually, you get less lags in data. So you know how much each risk is performing against the rules every time you do it. And you can look at that on an individual risk level. But the exciting thing is, as an underwriter, you can start to move towards more of a portfolio view across your risks. And we're already seeing, as you all know, insurers moving towards a strategic portfolio trading model with their underwriters. So they're looking at, okay, what does this look like against a portfolio? How do I then look at what risks have come through historically and apply different rule sets forward to do what-if scenarios? If the market changes, I understand that market changing more because I can see what's happened, where I've won business, where I haven't won business. I can see what's happening, and maybe I want to change those rules very quickly. And instead of waiting for long lags in, I want to change a rule now and I have to wait 3 months for it to be affected. I can actually just change that straight away within the algorithm. I can actually go, do you know what? I'm going to change that. That's the decision we're going to make, and respond to that market condition or internal risk appetite immediately.
Yeah.
You've also got this position there where you've got, against brokers, you can go with brokers. The broker can sit down with you straight away and go, actually, that's where that didn't work. That's where that did. And you've got that conversation around broker appetite and carrier appetite acting almost immediately rather than lags in data.
Absolutely. Which is critical if we actually want to respond to that customer need. And today, when I talk to brokers, insurers, the conversation goes back to, how can we be driving that customer excellence, that customer experience.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Which I think we have not always been the best at fulfilling.
It's really interesting you say that, because the passion of the broker and the carrier around driving that customer is there. But there are lags, or there has been lags in data. We're obviously seeing this improve already. But rather than you get a quarter's data a quarter after, and then it takes you a quarter to change it again, we're seeing brokers and carriers now having the ability to be able to go, how can we work better together, or how can we adjust better together so that we're delivering better outcomes for the clients that we're all working towards.
Yeah. So we are going through that transformation. And so what challenge, let's say, what opportunities, therefore, we should be looking for when we think about the brokers, the market we are serving every day?
Yeah, so for brokers, you just want to be easy, don't you? You want to know that it's predictable, it's consistent, and you know that when you submit that risk, it's going to go through, you know which carriers are going to be either part of that risk. When that's all agreed and decided, you want transparency of what's happening. We all live in a world where we carry phones with us and it's immediate. We know exactly what's happening. Why would the placement of a risk or the recovering from a loss, therefore a claim, be any different? People want immediacy, transparency, and they want to be able to know that when they've agreed on something, that goes through and it's done. And then the rest of the conversation is, how do you actually support your clients? So for me, what I'm seeing, but this isn't new, this is stuff we've seen in other parts of the industry. It's stuff we're already doing in this industry. But I think we're now looking at it on a more scaled basis, and we're looking at it starting to become part of the way in which we work. Not on everything, And it's not about, we've all heard the robots are coming. The robots have been here for years. Actually, where this wins, and we've seen it in medical science and change, is when you power brilliant people with great data and technologies that enable you to create that immediacy, transparency, and workflow. And for me, it's how do you bring all of those three things together?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that takes me to the fact that we are seeing our industry transform and change. We have underwriters, we have insurers, and we have brokers. So what does that mean in terms of data ownership? And you mentioned algorithmic underwriting. So where do we sit in that continuum?
That's a great question, and it's always the ones that come out, isn't it? Where will it be disrupted? What's data ownership? Let's face it, these are the, data. I'm a passionate believer you own your own data. That's why we've made some key strategic decisions around where algorithms sit. I think they have to sit with the carrier. They own them. It's their appetite.
Yeah.
They need to drive the rules that underpin them. I think that's really important, and be able to change them. That's what carriers are brilliant at, is, defining their risk appetite and managing that through. So everything like that should sit with the carrier and they own them. From a broking perspective, exactly the same. The broker should own their appetite and that sits with them. So I think for me, and it's always been my view about it, whether it's here or in finance, you should own the data where the data actually sits, not try and create these capabilities that sit in the center of things, because we're all very sensitive about it. We're all learning more and more about what does it mean to share data. We've seen that with open banking. We've seen where security is so critical. Mm-hmm. We're seeing more and more where cyber attacks are coming from. So actually getting the data as close to the people who own it is really important from my perspective. Then you start to go, well, actually, when you create workflow, who's also looking for change within that process? Because let's be honest, we've seen with wealth and asset management, let me give that example. Actually, people can do that themselves today.
Yeah.
You can go onto a platform today, and there are many of them out there, where you can make decisions for yourself about the investments that you want to take. We're seeing more and more transparency in pensions about where your pension is placed. And we're seeing more people go, no, that's not, I don't want to put my pension to go towards money in those directions. I want it more on sustainability, more on environment, more aligned to the values that I care about. And actually, I think you're going to continue to see there will always be brokers. We will always need brokers for some of that higher complex, that more client-focused, broader spectrum type of stuff. But we're also going to see individuals want to take ownership of some of those decisions themselves.
Yeah.
And actually, we've got to enable both. And every part of financial services has done that. So you can start to see how we'll get this blend of, the end client wanting to do stuff themselves or understand stuff more themselves, but also brokers who then are actually really focused on some of the higher complexity.
Mm-hmm. So, as I mentioned to you, I've been doing corporate startup engagement collaboration now for probably over 8 years, nearly 10 years now. Gosh, the time has gone.
Yeah, sure.
And we are reinventing that word, right? It's not startup corporate collaboration. We call that now venture client model.
Yep.
And so when I talk often to insurance companies who are going through that venture client modeling process, it still remains process innovation. But we would like to move to Horizon 2, which is product and service innovation, and maybe some point to business model innovation. Where do you think our industry is sitting now? Where can we go when we start looking at innovation and collaboration with other parties within the market?
Yeah, if you look at the history, I mean, you guys wrote an absolutely fantastic piece on some of these areas, Sabine, particularly that value client model. Actually, if you look at the history of this, let's be honest, this started around the financial crisis. and we saw the rise of the challengers, and then the incumbents go, well, actually, where do we sit on this? Because that's where a lot of the disruption came originally within the retail banks. And actually, you then had this, okay, so they're doing this stuff, let's us look at that. You know, how do we get quicker at opening accounts? How do we do it within a few minutes with a selfie? How do we look at what data do we really need to drive decisioning rather than collect all this stuff where actually you only need small amounts of data? And we saw this competition of start to be more open as we then saw people start to trust the disruptors and challengers and start to use them as their main banks. You then saw many incumbent banks open up their premises for startups and disruptors to actually house in.
Yes.
But the thing that nobody anticipated, they actually started to collaborate together, not the heritage or the incumbents, but the startups themselves. And actually, that's what I've always loved about that community is there's this belief of how do we win together? How do we share learning? How do we actually look at some of these challenges together that are non-compete? And I think the banks started to learn this. I certainly did when I was working for Royal Bank of Scotland. We had the startups inside of our head office in the area that had actually been reserved for the executive team. I worked with a brilliant CAO. His name was Simon McNamara, and he's absolutely incredible leader. And he opened that entire area up to the disruptors and the challengers. And you saw them collaborating. And we were like, well, how do we then collaborate? How do we start to? And I know we use this word collaboration a lot, but true collaboration is really tricky to do because that means you've got to open up and take those broader challenges and learn together. And then we saw not just incumbents, startups, scale-ups collaborating, we saw them partnering. We saw, you know, and I was involved in many of them actually when I was with RBS, which obviously NatWest is, okay, well, we're now going to partner with you to supply some of those services. And let's be honest, that's still really difficult to do with large organisations. And entrepreneurs want a yes or a no rather than a long, slow maybe. And actually, you then got to, okay, now that we're doing this and we're part of the same organisation, not only did we see partnering, we saw investment. And then we saw some of these fintechs and insurtechs being sold to the incumbents. And then you have this really strange thing happen, go, okay, I've got this massive organisation here and their culture, this smaller, nimble organisation here and their culture, and how do I get the power of the two? Not one dwarfs the other, or one is the only way to go. And we started to see models where those who had bought these smaller players try to work out, how do I stop them being so separate, the very thing we bought them for to power the culture we have doesn't work, or they just got so consumed that the very thing they didn't. So you started to see these models emerge where actually big incumbents could take some of the speed and some of the thinking and some of that product-led software thinking into their organisation. We saw one of the two, and it's really, this is all a leadership challenge. And actually, for me, you're now in this other place of, you know, I think people are much more thinking about, do we build stuff, do we buy, and do we partner? And you see much more, that's a common conversation now, which wasn't, let's be honest, even 5 years ago. And you now see, well, actually, do we need to build platforms? No, probably not. How do we create service organisations that can be used a lot? And all of these are live conversations today, and it's exciting. We're all still probably grappling with what it looks like, but you're seeing these conversations emerge. So for me, I think where I think this will go is you'll see much more partnering that works in a more effective way. You'll see much more collaborating across marketplaces. You'll see much more. Why wouldn't marketplaces join, you know, each marketplace? And I've said this a million times with Neuron. We've never wanted to be the only platform that enables great digital placement, because that's not happened in any part of financial services.
Absolutely.
There will always be a handful. We want to be one of them. And over time, why wouldn't they start those marketplaces connect together?
100%.
So I think you'll see much more collaboration, true collaboration. And I think you'll see incumbents or heritage organisations look to do more of the partnering or the end client of some of these organisations, which I thought your paper on this, Sabine, was spot on, because you can see, given the history of this big word collaboration and partnering, is actually going to naturally lead to where we start to see, well, hang on, there's a lot of areas of non-compete here.
Yeah.
There's actually areas where we could both all deliver a better service together. There's actually growth in a broader sense here. Then when you add in peripheral services, you've talked about other industries. What happens when you add those services into the marketplace, which we are already seeing some of those retail bank challenges do, becoming bigger apps or bigger super capabilities to be able to offer value to those clients. So that's why I even if insurance is behind today, it's already having conversations like that now. Other parts of FS are only getting to those conversations. And that's why I think this could be a very interesting place as it starts to adopt technologies, but adopt those new business models.
Yeah. And I want to echo a few statements you made, because, when I was running Startup Bootcamp in InsurTech, I was really privy to work with, I think, some of the leading insurers. And they were sat in my office. They sent their employees to sit with the startups, interact with those startups, to actually, get that more collaborative lens on things, but also become a little bit more, I would say, entrepreneurial in their mindset. The second is the talent garden, where actually the corporate then invite those entrepreneurs within their office, build environments where they actually start collaborating together and even pitching to customers together. I've had so many of my partners, my insurance partners, saying, we just pitched this for one of our clients with this startup or scale-up, and we'll see how it goes, because now we start working more collaboratively. And that, I love seeing that. But the third point I think I could see in my head as you were talking is reminding me a conversation I had with Emily Bradberg, right? Former CEO of Lloyd's Europe, which was about syndication. Yeah. Imagine if we have all those marketplace and we start addressing the protection gap by having those marketplace connecting with one another. Maybe we will start addressing, the sustainability issues and climate resilience problem we have today. Yeah. But this is why I don't want to lose the point of, this is an industry that has been adopting this stuff forever. Yeah. I mean, you look at where the disruption on personal lines came and aggregators. 100%. I mean, WTW is at the heart of that. You start to see, we've done this stuff. Your point of new fraud models, new risk and analytics, how you think about cyber risks. All of these things we've been doing for years. Technologies for rating and pricing. So that's why I'm like, is it really behind? Like, I just think there's this huge opportunity to galvanize and capture all of those things that we've been doing that you could argue are the first steps of automation, the first steps of digital distribution models, changing the way in which we work. Yeah. I think we've been doing it for years in insurance. The bit that we've got to continue to do is, let's be honest, we all, in any part of leadership, the challenge is getting a mix of diverse skills into that team that fully reflects every single member you serve. So if your team doesn't reflect the customers you serve, you're probably leaving somebody out of the room. And actually, how many times have we, and that's why I say most of my things come from learning and not doing it right. And actually, if you think about, how many times have we gone, we need somebody who's a bit more creative or a bit more innovative, or we need somebody who's got these skills because we've got a gap here. And we go out to headhunters, or we go out within our networks and we're presented with people
and they go, here you go, and we go, oh, not that innovative. Or we then go through the pain of getting new, different skills or innovative, and then we try and make them all the same when we get them in.
Yeah.
How many times have we seen that? And for me, what I think we've all got to really focus on as leaders is, and particularly in insurance, because these are end-to-end, they are marketplaces. You have to have that full mix of skills.
100%.
And if you don't, you've probably left somebody out of the room. So there's a gap in that thinking. And the ones who will win are the ones who will capture those thinking, those skills, and bring it to bear end to end across those marketplaces. And I think that's really critical as we move forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you remember those leadership evaluation where you have, blue, green,
I knew
yellow,
you were going to say that.
and red.
Yeah.
In our industry, we actually tend to have blue and green.
I know. Yeah.
And less red and yellows, right? And so it's funny because as you were saying, that's like, well, we tend to avoid the reds, and I have to change my behavior and actually go for the reds as well.
Yeah, it's human, and that's why this is all a leadership challenge. You think about the cost of technology; it's down. The speed of technology is up. Technology is converging. The things that we couldn't do before, we can do. It's there. So the technology will get done. It's there. And the disruptors will adopt stuff really quickly. They're like a tsunami of ants, aren't they? They always sit around the industry and start nibbling in, and then they break through. We saw it with payments. And just payments is a fantastic one to look at. About
100%. And we need to do more of it in our industry, right? Yeah. I interact with the Stripe team, funny enough, and I learn so much from them.
It's an incredible story.
Yeah.
And an incredible organisation, and the talent they have there. You then look at others who shape roles around people. These are things that we're not brilliant at yet. Yeah. And actually, that for me is the thing we've really got to focus on in this industry, is shape roles around some of the new types of skills we're going to have, give them the autonomy to move, really think about that product-led systems thinking, which is that iteration and go and keep iterating, and hopefully you create enough space. Think about, well, as I'm learning, what am I doing? Because let's face it, there's a lot of unknowns. The storytelling. How am I creating stories for people so that they can step into? Because let's face it, a lot of this is unknown. We don't know where it's going to go. So how am I building pictures for people that they can go, yeah, I get that. Therefore, I can also provide a view. How do we create a language that is accessible? I mean, I talk about this all the time. I did a keynote for an AI event, and I didn't understand the next agenda item, which was something about parables and paradigms and shifts and whatever. And I'm like, if we genuinely believe these things in the hands of the many can drive real opportunity, we've got to talk about them in a way that can get them into the hands of the many. Otherwise, we create fear.
Yes.
We create fear of ethics, as you've touched on. We create fear of ownership, as you've touched on. We create fear of managing risk forward, as you've also touched on. And actually, for me, if we start to talk about these things in a way that everybody in our organisations can go, I get that. Because I have 30 years experience of managing risk forward. Therefore, I can give you a view about the challenges or the problems that are going to emerge. Because the thing that AI does is it surfaces gaps and issues in your business model quicker than anything ever has. And if you've got people who understand operations brilliantly, risk submission brilliantly, actuarial skills, and they go, actually, I understand how you solve for that. You bring that together with incredible technologists, data specialists, that becomes really powerful.
Indeed, it becomes powerful. So, moving into the future, we talk about the disruptors. How can we actually build an industry which is more welcoming of the difference, and actually build itself to become a resilient industry that we need to see as we actually see more emerging risk appear?
Yeah, so first one, so welcome. Look, I think everybody is grappling with all the same challenges. This isn't new. We've also been talking about it forever, as you said. When was the word digital transformation coined, and what does it actually really mean there? I always laugh about this with fintech. What's fintech now? You know, we call some of these amazing businesses and unicorns we have here startups, and yet they've got 50 million customers or 1,000 people. It's like, you know, and so I think about this a lot, and I think we've got to talk about the stories more. We are really good at talking about all the issues, aren't we? And we don't just do that in our industry. We also do that in the UK at the moment as well, really well. So how do we talk about the stuff that we're doing in a really positive way? Because I think there's some incredible stuff happening in our industry, and there's some incredible people in our industry. So how do we create the positive stories that start to go, do you know what? This is a great industry for data specialists. You might not have thought about it, but like, there's great people here. Your skills are absolutely needed, because it is all about data in our industry at the end of the day. So like, I think how do we talk about it in a more positive way? How do we talk about it not as we're going to change or replace everyone, but actually how are we going to power the great people we have in these roles today to do the things that they're brilliant at? Yeah. Not tied up in the things we don't want them to. So there's like, some of this isn't complex to me. We dress it up in complexity, or we don't talk about it in a positive way. So he's talking about those positive stories. And then when we do get those new skills in, let's not try and make them all the same. Yeah. You know, let's embrace. And it's really hard to do. You know, even this fail fast while you're failing, and you realise something didn't work, so you switch it off. It's difficult to crack the cakes out, isn't it? It's really hard. It is. Psychologically. But how do you talk about the learns more? How do you share in non-compete? How do you start to look at that fast? So for me, is how do we bring that together? But how do we talk about it more? And also, how do you not walk past when it doesn't work? Because that's the standard you set. So for me, as I said, it's all leadership and culture. And then when you said about where's the industry going, I think you'll see, you know, on the more practical side, more convergence. I think you'll see convergence of technologies, which will power different business models, different distribution capabilities. You then look at the data that is in insurance. I mean, we are incredibly data rich, which enables us to bring that more to the forefront of our processes, our workflows, that is all about delivering better for the clients, for the customers at the end of the day. And then you'll see new roles come in, undoubtedly. And you never know, Sabine, we may see some disrupted. You don't know, is how do those roles become disrupted or change in a way that they may not be exactly as they are today, but they start to become, we've already talked about, strategic portfolio underwriting. That's a shift. We've already talked about how do you bring in new generation of brokers that is all about immediacy. They've got everything on their phone and they're going, this is the best outcome for my clients. You know, there's so much stuff that you could see changing in the way in which we work, and then some of those new roles emerging as we go forward. I'm going to be too old to be a drone driver or something like that.
You know, use those new flying device, right, where you can just put your 2 feet on top of them. This is fantastic, Lou, and so much richness in you know, the insight you shared with me. One thing that comes to mind is, you know, we don't know what the future is going to be like and what it entails, but it's going to be rich, and there's a lot of things we need to learn from the incumbent much as from the young people.
We need both.
Because we have a talent gap, and we
need both.
The thing you actually highlighted, which I think is we need to remember, is how we focus on the positive storytelling. And I heard that from a number of carriers, because, you know, when we think about climate resilience, it feels negative for many of them. So, you know, how can we create a spin which is much more positive, they say, Sabine. So we are trying to work this one out with a lot.
Well, yeah, because why would you say, do you not want to do something that's better for the environment? I mean, like, do you not want to do something better with data? I mean, these are, of course we all do. So how do we, and we're probably doing loads of stuff.
Already. We just don't know about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Final tip for anyone listening to our conversation. What would be your final word or final tip for anybody out there?
So for anybody that follows me around the fintech particularly area, and obviously some of the work that we're doing in particular with Neuron, is I'm a passionate leader of how do we bring in those skills, because we've seen where it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Not in this industry actually, but in when we all saw facial recognition with our phone. That was a class. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen the YouTube, The Coded Gaze. It's from 2016 now. But it also is a stark reminder of when you don't have everybody in the room. And actually for me, it's about, we have such a rich industry, a rich history, and a real opportunity to make a difference on all of the things you've talked about. Whether that's climate, whether that's how we tackle things like cyber, how we actually deliver those outcomes better to end users, end clients, end customers. And actually, you can only do that with great teams. And for me, it's now about how do we lead teams through that?
Yeah.
Because it will change. We've seen that. We've seen industry change, usually in response to a crisis.
Often.
We saw the financial crisis. Never lose the opportunity of a great crisis. We've seen that so many times in our industry. Is how do we do it here without that? How do we continue to push forward at pace without the crisis or the incident? And I think there's an opportunity to do that. But that's leadership. That is, how do we continue to create great environments, fearless spaces where people can challenge, to your point when you started this about authenticity, we talk about authenticity in different ways, but for me what it means is, if somebody feels fearless to turn up to work, you're going to get incredible stuff out of that individual.
Absolutely.
You times that by 10, you're going to get amazing stuff. And you're going to get firsts, and you're going to get speed, and you're going to get pace, and you're going to see things emerge that we maybe didn't think of. So what I care about so much, because I haven't always created those best environments, because we're all learning.
Continuous learner.
And for me, it's really think about that. Fearless spaces where people can come and drive incredible change. Because then I think it's quite incredible what you can do.
Absolutely. Lou, thank you so much
Thanks,
for joining
Sabine.
me on Scouting for Growth. Very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scouting for Growth. Please subscribe, share with friends, and leave a 5-star rating. Your rating is so valuable. I review all of them, and my team help me adapt content to meet your needs. Also, connect with me on my preferred channels. I am a B2B growth expert, so you will find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, and X as well as Blue Sky. All information available below. Until next, keep scouting for growth.